it's been actually really eye-opening to me and made me very conscious of actually reading and taking things in myself. When I come across something now that I think my students will enjoy, I give myself permission to not necessarily worry that I'm making sure that kids know how to use the apostrophes and the commas, and it's not that that's not important, but I really give myself permission to say, you know what, this is something my students are very much interested in. I can teach the other stuff incidentally, but this is helping them to be far more globally minded and really aware of what's happening in the world.
And inquiry has allowed students to dive a little bit deeper into their own interests. So in a subject like history, it's often far removed and there's not a lot of jumping off points for students to get really excited about. With inquiry, it allows them to explore topics that aren't necessarily stuck in the past. So for example, grade 8 Canadian history has a lot of links to First Nations. So when we stopped to take a look at First Nations rights today in Canada and the experience of First Nations people today in Canada, that was a really big relevant hook for my students. They had heard of reserves, maybe they had been on reserves, but they really didn't know what the function was and why they were there. So inquiry had gave us the opportunity to explore relevant current events and link that to the past.
I think inquiry has changed my teaching. It's made me more open to what the children are curious about. I don't know exactly where I'll be going next, and I use the children's questions to drive their learning. And what I've noticed is the children are much more engaged. They're much more a part of the planning of our unit and their learning tasks. When the period is ended, they still want to talk about what we're learning.
They are definitely more willing to take risks in terms of their own learning and take risks along with me. So I'm usually very open and honest with them about trying something new.
I think it's a real sense of collaboration within the classroom, so it's no longer about being the person at the front of the room, but I am actually in there with my students, learning as they do, figuring out the best ways to do things. And also it's really about the kids learning from each other, and it's been amazing to see kids that wouldn't normally talk or associate with each other relying on the expertise of that person to get what they need.
The biggest shift has been moving away from being the person at the front of the classroom who is giving the knowledge to the students and allowing myself to be off to the side and letting them go on a journey of discovery.
I think by using the inquiry model to teaching, it has invited me to bring in more experts from the field. I brought in parent volunteers before, and if they have an area of expertise. I taught flight in grade 6, and I had a pilot come in. But with the inquiry model, we are accessing particular people in the field a lot more. And I'm giving the children's questions to those people before they come in, so that when they do their presentations, they can bring the information that the children are seeking.
We have, I'm very fortunate to have a couple of class iPads and some computers, and it's really given the kids permission and access to programs that they had never used before. And I had another child who decided that they wanted to figure out how to use Google Floor Plan, and in doing so then taught many more students.
One of my favorite tools that I've used this year is Minecraft. We're using it right now in geography to look at urban public spaces and how can we use sustainable practices to revamp urban public spaces in developing countries around the world. So they're creating those public spaces as is in Minecraft and then applying sustainable practices to redesign those spaces also using Minecraft. And it has been a huge tool for us to excite students and get them engaged and involved.